international developing story where President Donald Trump has issued a stark warning to Venezuela's newly confirmed interim leader, Delcy Rodríguez, saying she will pay a very big price if she does not cooperate with the United States following the capture of her predecessor, Nicolás Maduro. Now we have Alexander von Rugen, global affairs analyst from Ontario, Canada, joining us to discuss this development. Good morning, Alexander from Nigeria. We see that, President Trump has warned Venezuela's interim leader, Delcy Rodríguez, that she will pay a very big price, like he said, if she doesn't cooperate. What are the immediate implications of this threat for U.S. and Venezuela's relations?
Well, it's. I think everybody knows now when Trump makes a threat, he backs it up. So it's basically a message. You were in a corrupt regime. We captured your leader, and if you were part of that corruption, you will be under a microscope, and everyone along with you. The intelligence has already been gathered. It was people on the ground within Maduro's regime that actually assisted with the U.S. forces in his rendition to the United States. It would not have gone so flawlessly if that hadn't been the case. Rodriguez will most likely guide the country into a transitional government with Gonzalez and Machado, who were recognized as, Gonzalez was recognized as the duly elected leader of Venezuela, but never allowed to serve because he had to flee the country for his life. So I think that's what Trump is trying to say. And I would think if she has a good bit of intelligence, she's going to realize this is the case. If she meets it with arrogance, she started by saying Maduro is the duly elected president and he should be released immediately. That was kind of a canned answer, the politically correct answer that she had to give because she was part of the Maduro regime. You can't criticize her for that. She's just doing her job. Now she's got to listen up and realize that if they carry on the same way they were, the strikes will continue.
Right. And of course, Rodriguez has called Maduro the sole legitimate leader. And do you think, how could her defiance affect, regional stability in Latin America?
Well, they still feel they have a core following. And in order to keep it, she's got to make robust statements in defiance of America. I think part of the reason for those statements is to get a barometer reading on how much support they have in the country. What we're seeing is that there was very much dissension in Venezuela, but it was silent dissension because they were afraid. And under Machiavellian principles, if the leader of the country is a tyrant, they can fear him. But if they hate him, they'll support a coup, they'll support a regime change, they'll support anyone else. And history has dictated that over many, many, many regimes.
Okay. And of course, we see that China is, of course, condemning the U.S. raid in, Caracas. Do you think that this might affect the relationship between the U.S. and China, especially with, the broader global diplomacy?
No. First of all, Venezuela's in the Western Hemisphere. Under the Monroe Doctrine, America is basically empowered to protect the Americas. That includes North and South America, and they've done so in the past. Even with Venezuela, they defended Venezuela against European colonialists that wanted to cash in on the country back in 1902. Now, when we look at China, they're not what you'd say typical colonialists, but they had a heavy investment, almost $1 billion+ in the oil patch in Venezuela. Much like the Americans, who had initially invested, built up the oil patch, and then lost it due to nationalization by Maduro's predecessor, Chavez. The Chinese want to keep a balance of trade with America. They're not going to send warships to South America. Maduro's already he's been apprehended. He's in America. He's going to be tried. they've got to give the political rhetoric of opposition because the rest of the world, and China isn't the only one, is claiming the U.S. Broke international law.
Yeah.
I think it's fair to say the U.S. is probably rewriting international law right now. That if you're a tyrant and if you're a criminal, and if you hide behind the curtain of diplomatic immunity, we're going to draw that curtain back and we're going to deal with you regardless.
Right. And of course, we've seen that, Latin American countries, including Chile, have expressed concern over, the U.S. military actions. Do you think this could shift regional alliances or, diplomatic strategies?
Well, I think our Chile and Argentina are both leaning more right these days. Of course, whenever a head of state of a neighboring country is apprehended, everyone gets a chill down their spine. Like, what have I done wrong? Am I next? The fact remains is if you're an abuser of the system, you're going to be under a microscope. In the case of Venezuela, these bad behaviors have been taking place for many, many years. The charges of narcoterrorism, the first indictment came down in 2020, almost 6 years ago now. This is not a new situation. Now, Trump has only been in power since the beginning of, almost a year now. And it was on his agenda to correct what he couldn't do in his first term. He didn't have the majority in the House and the Senate in the U.S., so he couldn't pursue these executive orders that he's doing. And he did say he was going to drain the swamp. And I think Venezuela is part of that swamp.
Right. And the U.S., of course, is linking its cooperation with Venezuela to access the country's massive oil reserves. What does this signal about, U.S. foreign policy priorities?
Well, the oil serves several masters. It keeps, let's be honest here. The U.S. intent here is to keep the U.S. dollar as the global petrodollar. We can talk about the BRICS pact, doing trade-offs now with China and Russia. The bottom line, the big market is Europe. North America now, the U.S. is the biggest oil producer in the world at 14 million barrels a day. By taking on Venezuela, if we go by what its peak capacity was in the heydays of Venezuela, it was around 4.5 million barrels. You add that to current American volume, you're closing in on 19 million barrels a day. The second highest would be Saudi Arabia at 12, and then Russia at 11. In effect, with this forced merger, America can control OPEC because they control the price, the global price of oil. That will also affect Nigeria and a lot of other petrocurrencies that want to keep oil at about $60, certainly about $50 per barrel. So Trump will use this as negotiating power for sure. And I think his plan, and I guess this is yet to be seen how it's enacted, is as a benevolent oppressor. He's under the allegation of giving newfound freedom to the Venezuelans. He's also going to make new investments into Venezuela, which will boost their productivity and hopefully put it into a government that's going to reinvest it in its people with social programs, humanitarian, healthcare, all the niceties that are supposed to be in a thriving society.
Right. And you mentioned earlier that, of course, that President Donald Trump is rewriting international laws. Could these events trigger military or economic responses from other global powers? What might those responses look like?
Well, I think we've already heard them. Russia's signed a pact with Venezuela back in October that they would come to their defense. Well, I think it was a bluff. They're not there. It's too big a risk. Russia would be too exposed. They're fighting in the Ukraine. They're fighting in Western Africa right now with the Africa Corps and the Sahel. They're in the DRC. I think the resources are a little stretched right now, but the fact is they would have a hard time entering the Western Hemisphere. You know, Africa, Asia, Europe seems to be on limits. The rest of the world, not so much.
Wow. Well, thank you so much, Alexander, for joining us and, you know, having this conversation with us. Of course, the situation and the development is still ongoing, and we'll see how, you know, this, you know, pans out. Thank you so much for joining.
Time will tell. I guess we'll be seeing more of each other.
Sure. Take care.